Today is April 21st, 2022. My name is Catherine Marin. I'm interviewing Alex Schnupp for the University Library Special Collections and Archives at the University of Texas Rio Grande Valley, hereafter abbreviated as UTRGV. This project is in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please note, Alex, that this interview will be placed in the University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there's anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there's anything you want to talk about, please bring it up and we'll talk about it. The University Library Special Collections and Archives will archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation you are willing to share. UTRGV University Library will retain copyright or non-exclusive rights to the interview and any other materials you donate to Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting to make sure you agree with our interview procedures before we continue. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each question. Do you give University Library Special Collections and Archives at UTRGV consent to archive your interview and your materials at the UTRGV University Library?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives right, title, and interest in copyright over the interview and any materials you provide?
Yes, I agree.
Do you agree to allow UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I agree.
Do you grant the University Library Special Collections and Archives consent to share your Zoom interview with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History mini project, which will include posting the interview on the internet?
Yes, I agree.
As you recall, we previously filled out a pre-interview form. We use information from the pre-interview form to help in research. The entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas at Austin. Before Voces sends it to UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives, we would have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members, so that will not be a part of your public file. Your public file will only be accessible at UTRGV University Library. The final 2 questions ask for your consent on what I just described. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in your public file available to researchers at UTRGV University Library Special Collections and Archives?
Yes.
On occasion, UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and Voces receive requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your email with journalists?
Yes.
Thank you for your consent. Your experiences and stories mean a lot to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives. I look forward to what you say in the interview questions I will now ask. Alex, thank you for your time. Like I said earlier, your stories and experiences are valuable to us at UTRGV Special Collections and Archives and to our partners at the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Because you have been a sort of young educator for young Latino children in New York, I know that a topic like this is important to you to be able to resonate with Latinos nationwide and see how COVID-19 has affected us. Before we talk about COVID-19 stories, can you please share with us a bit about yourself, who you are, and how you wish to be known? Who is Alex Schnupp?
Hello, I am a sophomore at St. John Fisher in Rochester, New York. I'm 19 years old. I'm minoring in Spanish and my major is pharmaceutical chemistry. I graduated in 2020, so right when COVID hit.
Okay, thank you. This first section of questions asks you to please share your stories and memories from when the COVID-19 pandemic made its first impacts in December 2019 to about the summer of 2020. So the first question I want to ask you is, can you share some memorable stories about how you first heard or learned about COVID-19?
I think I mostly first heard of it like over social media, like memes and other jokes like that. And then in person, mostly people just being like, have you heard of this or that? It didn't really hit me that it was going to come into my life. I didn't think much of it when I first heard about it.
What were some early reports or rumors about COVID-19 that you remember back in 2020?
Like I said, mostly memes. The more rumors were things that were happening far away, so I didn't hear much about them other than news reports that it could be coming over. I don't remember much.
At what point did you realize this pandemic was a serious, life-altering event, or do you not think it's serious, and why?
I think I mostly realized it right when my school got canceled. Originally we were just going to be extending our spring break, but then it still didn't feel as real until I was traveling home and everyone was wearing masks and very distant from each other. So it definitely hit then, right when school was canceled.
Do you remember what it was like for you during the stay-at-home orders in 2020? And do you have any stories from this time that you could tell?
I remember it was very difficult at first. My sister and I were traveling right when everything got canceled. So by the time we got back, my sister and I quarantined together because my grandpa lives with us. So I quarantined at her house away from the rest of my family. It was very difficult not being able to see my friends, especially because it was my senior year. So I never got to be able to say goodbye to any of my teachers or many of my friends that were moving far away. It was very difficult not having a lot of those last high school things like graduation and prom. My school was pretty big. There's about 2,000 in total. There's about 500 in my graduating class. So we couldn't have graduation. Our diplomas were handed to us or mailed to us. So it really sucked not being able to have a lot of that. I remember it was very daunting at first. And it was really weird not being able to see my friends for a while. Then eventually, when it was warmer and summer hit, we would sit outside far away from each other, but that was the first time I was seeing my friends in months.
Over the last couple of years, what news media, social media, or other sources do you rely on to keep you informed about COVID-19? Why do you prefer these news sources?
I don't usually seek out news myself every day, but my grandpa would have it on television, so I would listen that way. And obviously social media and what my family says around me. To keep up with COVID, a lot of times I'll just look at my university's news. We have an email that comes out every week saying the cases for the school that week and if any of the rules surrounding COVID-19 have changed.
Can you share with me what you understand about COVID-19 as an infectious disease and how you feel it's impacted society? Likewise, can you share with me what you don't understand about COVID and wish you could know more about?
I understand that it's very infectious. It's very easy to travel between people. Luckily, with vaccinations and things, it's less deadly. At first, it was very deadly, which was very scary, especially living with an elderly person and family that has asthma and things like that. I think there was a very great impact on society. Many people were isolated for so long these past few years, especially the kids not being able to go to school and learning online is a great change that will definitely impact society in the future that we'll see.
Do you feel your family has the same beliefs as you about COVID-19, or are there some members who take it more seriously or lightly?
I think at first most of us had the same beliefs, and then as time has gone on, definitely my dad has seen it as less scary. He thinks that people should just go out and if they get it, they get it, which can be scary because I've lasted 2 years without getting it. So I'm not trying to get COVID. but I don't think our beliefs differ as much. Definitely my parents and my grandpa are sick of wearing masks again. So if that does come back, I doubt they will be wearing masks, which I think if a mask mandate does come back, I will wear a mask.
This next part asks you to share any stories about COVID-19 vaccines and any vaccination related stories you may wish to tell. Did you get a vaccine and any follow-up booster shots?
Yes, I got 3 vaccines with my booster.
What was it like? Was it easy or difficult for you in terms of scheduling or wait time?
It wasn't too difficult. I think I waited a bit longer, like after my age group was allowed to get vaccinated. I waited a bit longer. It was required for my school, so I did have to get it before I could go back to school. It wasn't, I got my vaccine at my local grocery store in the pharmacy, and then my booster was with a clinic at my school. So there wasn't a lot of wait time. We just had to schedule ahead of time, a couple weeks ahead of time.
Can you share a memory from the place where you were vaccinated or boosted, if you have any?
Oh yeah, so originally I was scheduled to get the J&J vaccine through a clinic at my school, but then that got canceled due to complications with the vaccine, and so I got it at my local grocery store. And then for the booster, we also had to get the booster in order to go back to school. So I scheduled that with my school and had that at a clinic there.
This section asks questions about how COVID-19 has directly impacted your life as a student and student teacher, as well as how your family was impacted. You said you were a senior in high school when COVID started, correct?
Yes.
While you attended school, were sudden changes made at your school for safety from the virus? Other than just the extension of the spring break?
Right. So for my last week of school, I was in Florida with my sister. So I should have been in school. It wasn't my spring break yet, but I skipped school for the last week. So the last time I was in high school, there was no changes. People were talking about it a little bit, but it definitely wasn't very serious. No one really thought much about it. It seemed very sudden. All of my friends, when I was in Florida, all of my friends were saying all the changes. I think they made like hand sanitizing stations and all of that the week before school was canceled.
Did you agree or disagree with the changes, like the extension of the spring break or the health like things that you said about the hand sanitizer, stuff like that, even though you weren't there, but from your friends that told you about it?
I think I would agree. I think the changes were necessary, even though everyone was hit very hard. I think hopefully that saved a couple people from getting sick.
Do you think these changes affected you personally as the school year went on?
There was only changes for about a week, and like I said, I wasn't there. But after we got sent home and we were learning online, many of my teachers weren't. Zoom wasn't very much of a big thing. Many of my teachers didn't know about it, and being seniors, they knew that not many people were going to care. So a lot of the work, they would send work, but me included, I didn't do a lot of the work I should have been doing. I think only one of my teachers were doing a live stream class. Originally, she started doing her class on Instagram Live and then moved to like Google Meetings.
Speaking about remote learning, do you think it had a negative or positive effect on you personally throughout your career as a student moving forward?
I think there were negative and positive aspects. I think it was very negative at first, especially finishing high school, because I had no motivation to do any of the work. It was very difficult for me to even open my laptop and look at the work that my teacher sent. But it is, being in college now, we don't do any, at least for my freshman year, they weren't allowed to hand back papers. So all of our work was PDFs on laptops and you had to turn it in through PDFs, which I think I kind of like working directly on my laptop instead of having to lug around a lot of papers and stuff like that. So I think that's one positive, is more being able to use more technology in school.
Is there anything memorable that you can remember from your experience as a remote learner in school, mainly during the years of 2020 and 2021?
I think, like I said, my Spanish teacher teaching her class on Instagram Live was pretty memorable. I think honestly most of it was memorable because all of it was a new experience that nobody really knew how to navigate yet. The fall of my freshman year of college, we did get sent home early, so that was very daunting to me, being set online again, because I was so used to being back in the classroom, even though we were still doing work on our laptops. Going from in-person classes back to Zoom was very challenging.
How do you think remote learning affected you long-term, specifically in the way that you had a sudden change from high school to college?
I think it definitely affected my work ethic. Being directly online, it can be harder to focus when it's so easy to open a new tab and start watching Netflix or YouTube when you should be doing your work. I think it definitely made it easier to procrastinate doing work, because there's always going to be the Dropbox link that you can just upload instead of having to face your professor and say, I didn't turn this in. It's easier to just not do the work and then turn it in late.
Do you think remote learning was something effective that ultimately helped you or brought your learning capabilities down?
I think it's a little bit of both. Mostly brought my learning capabilities down because, like I said, it's much easier to get distracted, but it's also much easier to look up an answer when I get slightly stuck on a problem instead of just powering through it.
Other than school, were you employed when the pandemic first started?
No, I was not.
Did becoming employed at the time scare you, like having to or something like that?
I think it would have a little bit. Yeah, I think it did, especially because having my parents working and then being home all the time, I knew probably wasn't the best time to get a job.
When working with the children you do now, was there anything in the way that you saw as a difficult obstacle, like remote learning or safety protocols or anything like that?
Yes, one of the weeks we met on Thursdays of every week, and one of them, they were in person, but one of them, I was on Zoom, and then one of the weeks my partner that I went with was on Zoom, and the children were very unfocused, even though I figured she had seen Zoom before. She could see herself in the screen, so a lot of times she was dancing and jumping around and singing and just not paying attention to anything around her other than seeing herself dance on the screen. While we were in person, even though the mask mandate was lifted, we still wore masks, and many of the children still wore masks. A lot of times they would have them under their nose or take them off to eat or drink, but it was a bit challenging to get around, but I think it worked out fine.
How do you think the Latinx children that you work with have been directly affected by the pandemic?
So all the children I worked with are 10 years old. So when the pandemic started, they're around 8, meaning they would have had to stop. They're in 5th grade, so they would have had to stop their learning and move online, which, being from a smaller inner city school, they most likely didn't have all the technology they needed, which I think really slowed down their development. They seemed, before this project, I hadn't worked with kids very much. So I didn't have much experience, but they seemed a lot more underdeveloped than I would have expected, most likely because they had to start learning online, which can be very hard for children, especially when they don't like paying attention. and when technology is so exciting for them that they can just mess around on technology instead of actually focusing on what they should be learning.
Would you be willing to share about what your parents' jobs are?
Yes, my dad is a chef at a retirement home, and then my mom is a chemical technician at Kodak.
How were their jobs affected during the pandemic, if they were at all?
Because my dad was seen as a essential worker, he still had to work. My mom had less days of work. She would work longer and less days so that she was there. She was going in and out of the office at less times. But my dad, working at a retirement home, had a lot of COVID guidelines that he had to follow. He was one of the first people to get vaccinated. And I think it was very difficult seeing, obviously, being at an elderly home, he was used to his customers passing away sometimes, but they were hit very hard. So I could definitely tell it was hard for him to see all of the people he's used to serving passing away.
Are there any stories they told you about what happened at work during the pandemic that you remember?
Not very specifically. Like I said, many of the people at my dad's work passing away and him being frustrated when many of his workers did get COVID. Recently, a couple months ago, COVID ran rampant at my mom's work, and that was the first time someone in my family had gotten COVID. She ended up getting COVID. It didn't hit her very hard. She had very mild symptoms, but it was still very scary having having someone in my family get COVID.
How did you personally feel about your parents going to work during the pandemic?
It was a little bit scary. I know my mom doesn't work with very many people in her lab. She usually only sees people when she's like in her break room or whatever like that. But I knew it was very scary for my dad being around a lot of people that are susceptible easily to COVID and him having to serve food and things. It was a little bit scary seeing him. He had to get like tested every morning or else he wouldn't be allowed in the building. He had to get tested. His temperature was tested. He was one of the first people to get COVID, which was nice. Or not get COVID, get vaccinated for COVID, which was nice that he got vaccinated.
Were you scared or nervous at any point for their health and well-being while they went to work, or even yours?
I was a little bit scared, yeah, especially because even if I knew they would most likely, them and my siblings would most likely be okay if we got COVID, but we do live with my grandfather who is 87 years old, so it was a bit scary. If someone in my family got COVID, he could easily have gotten it.
Were there any significant changes in your household that occurred because of the pandemic, or is it all just the same?
I don't think there's many changes. Obviously, we went out less. There wasn't a lot of times where they would go out and see friends. We were home more often. They would be going to the grocery store more often, or less often, but buying more groceries every time they were at the store. But other than that, I don't think it changed much.
This last section asks you to share any stories or anything that you have about this pandemic and the response by local, state, and national elected officials. You can feel free to respond or pass on any of the questions. Do you feel satisfied with the local response to COVID-19 in Monroe County over these past 2 years?
I would say I'm pretty satisfied. I think they could have gone without lifting restrictions as early, especially because there would be waves where you think, especially in the summer when people were more outside, there'd be waves where the cases would go down. And I think they lifted the restrictions a bit earlier than they could have. If they had them a bit longer, it could have made the whole pandemic a bit shorter.
Are you satisfied with the state response to COVID-19 led by your governor, Kathy Hochul, over these last couple of years?
I think, like I said, they could have prolonged restrictions a tiny bit longer. At this point, with COVID coming back, I do expect to have more restrictions in the next coming months if the cases keep rising.
Is there anything that you know of that your leaders have done differently than our state governor here in Texas, Greg Abbott, when talking about the COVID-19 pandemic?
I'm not sure. I believe in Texas they did lift the mask restrictions much before New York did, but I'm not 100% sure.
How do you feel about the national response to COVID-19 led by President Trump in the year 2020 and then President Biden from 2021 to present?
I think there could have been many different things he could have done differently, especially just taking it more seriously in the beginning in general. I think it could have definitely helped either way. I believe we would have been hit, everyone in the world would have been hit hard no matter the precautions that you took. But I think there was a lot of different things he could have done much better.
If you had the power of a political office to respond to COVID-19, what would you have done differently?
I have no idea. Maybe be more respectful while talking about it, because I remember many times President Trump would say some questionable things, and just prepare in general. I think there was not much preparation, even though many people could have seen it coming.
This year is a special year in our national democracy because it's a midterm election voting year. Do you plan to vote? And if so, is the issue of COVID-19 going into factor into your votes?
I do plan to vote. I'm not sure how much the COVID-19 will be in a factor of that. I think at this point, most people understand the restrictions that are needed. I haven't delved into the differences of their beliefs much, but I am going to vote.
Will you consider the national response to the COVID-19 pandemic in your vote for a presidential candidate when the presidential election does come, and if COVID is still around long term by then?
I think it will be considered a bit, but I also think there are many different factors that outweigh the pandemic. I think in total it's not going to be the biggest factor I would think of when voting, but it would probably be a small consideration.
And lastly, is there anything else you would like to share with me about your experiences with COVID that I have not asked about?
No, I don't think so. I think a lot was covered.
Okay, well, thank you, Alex, for sharing your stories with me. The Voces of a Pandemic Oral History Project.
Thank you.